Hello, Robs. We're back with The Golem Remembered. 1909 to 1980. Variations of a Jewish Legend, Arnold L. Goldsmith. I believe this is Chapter 7. Chapter 7, which is a rather long one. The Golem Remembered in Popular Culture and Poetry. There is a Golem joke that goes something like this. A wealthy American Jew visiting Prague after World War II wanted to see the remains of the Golem in the attic of the alt-new school when the shammers explained that it was forbidden for anyone to enter. The American businessman was insistent, opening his wallet and taking out a substantial bill, which he slipped into the shammer's pocket. 15 minutes later, the visitor returned and complained angrily that he had wasted his time and money because he found nothing in the attic but old worn talisman. Talisman? Is that supposed to be a talisman? Worn talisman, torn prayer books, and mounds of dust. When the shamus asked if there were nothing else in the attic, the angry American remembered one other thing. An old mirror on the wall. "Aha," said the shamus. "Then you did see the Golem." Golem stories have continued to fascinate readers of all ages, from Prague to Buenos Aires. As the 20th century enters its last 2 decades, it is safe to predict that this interest will grow. 2 world wars, the Great Depression, wars in Korea, Vietnam, and the Middle East, the atom and hydrogen bomb, space exploration, and nuclear energy have intensified man's need for superheroes. The time always seems ripe for a new redeemer. The bigger the problems, the greater the need. Modern man's interest in the occult is insatiable. An age of science, which has witnessed man's journey to the moon and back, still enjoys being terrified by Dracula, Frankenstein, and Rosemary's Baby. The exorcism of Satan in books and film has created a new generation of believers. Superman 1 breeds Superman 2, and the Incredible Hulk joins Mandrake the Magician in the eternal combat against evil. No wonder there was a resurgence of interest in the Golem legend in the 1970s, for it is a legend combining all the ingredients of a popular film or television series: violence, the occult, religion, historical roots, supernaturalism, and even sex. This final chapter surveys the Golem legend as it appears in 20th century film, comic strips, short stories, children's literature, and poetry. The challenge of portraying the legendary monster on celluloid in painting and in poetry, as well as in fiction, has been immense, and artists have responded enthusiastically. The German films and Superman comic strips may have greatly distorted the concept of the Golem as he appears in the tales of Rosenberg and Bloch, but Beverly Brodsky McDermott's paintings to accompany her children's books would certainly have appealed to both men, and H. Leavick and Jorge Borges, I don't know how you say Borges' his name, had they known each other, would have found that they had much in common. It is not surprising that composers have also been inspired by the legend of the Golem of Prague. This study will not analyze individual musical adaptations, but 4 should at least be mentioned in passing. 2 are operas, one by Eugen D. Elbert, Der Golem, libretto by F. Lyon, which premiered at Frankfurt in 1926 but is no longer performed. The other, The Golem, composed by Mr. and Mrs. Abraham Elstein, which had its world premiere at the New York City Center Opera in March 1962. Gershom Scholem in Kabbalah mentions a third, a Golem Suite for Orchestra, 1932, composed by Joseph Akron, who was influenced by the Habima production of Leavick's play. According to Scholem, the last piece of this suite was written as the first movement's exact musical image in reverse to symbolize the disintegration of the homunculus. The 4th musical adaptation, Der Golem, a ballet by Francis Burt, choreographed by Erika Hanke, was produced in 1962 in Vienna. The movies discover the Golem. Several movie versions of the Golem of Prague have been made, but the man most frequently mentioned in discussion of these films is Paul Wegener, or is it Wegener, the great German silent film actor and director. According to Donald F. Glut in his fascinating study, The Frankenstein Legend, a tribute to Mary Shelley, and Boris Karloff, 1973, Wegener was filming locations in Prague in 1913 for a supernatural horror film when he first heard of and was intrigued by Rabbi Lowe's homunculus. Within a year, his Bioscope company produced Der Golem, renamed The Monster of Fate for English viewers, with himself in the title role. In this film, the creature could not possibly have passed as a human being. Wegener's Golem was truly a monster, his face clay-like, his hair seemingly carved from stone, his boots heavy. This was indeed a worthy predecessor to the later Frankenstein monster of the talkies. As in Mary Shelley's version, an artificially created being was given the gift of life only to eventually turn upon humanity as a violent horror that must be destroyed. The main difference between the Golem and the Frankenstein monster were the forces that brought them to life. The first magic, the second science. The results were nevertheless the same. This first Golem movie, directed by Wegener and fellow screenwriter Heinrich Galeen, almost suffered the same fate as the silent versions of Frankenstein, which were never seen again. Fortunately, however, a print was miraculously discovered in 1958 by Paul Saarlander, a European film collector. The owner of a toy store in Europe was selling old 35mm movie projectors and giving his customers small lengths from 12 to 15 feet of silent film, which turned out to be this original Golem feature. Luckily, for the sake of film history, Sauerlander was able to track down the various owners and emerge from the hunt with a complete film of Der Golem. Within a contemporary setting, the film tells how some workers discovered the Golem's remains in the ruins of an old synagogue. An elderly antique dealer buys them and brings the monster to life through the use of the Kabbalah. As long as the Golem serves as a slave, things go well. But then he falls in love with the antique dealer's lovely daughter, played by the actress Lydia Salmanova, Wegener's wife. That's what I said, wife. Like Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the Golem develops a soul and suffers terribly when the girl rejects his repulsive form. After going berserk, he falls from a tower and is killed. Sounds like a good movie. The most famous of the early Golem films is the one Wegener directed in 1920, Der Golem. Wie in die Welt kam, the Golem, how he came into the world. This film, set in medieval Prague, attempted to be more faithful to the legend than the earlier ones had been. Why the credits list adapted from Gustav Meyrink after scenario by Heinrich Galeen is a mystery, because the film has no resemblance to the novel. The sets, designed by Professor Hans Polzig, the noted German architect, and built by Karl Freund, recreated the Jewish ghetto. Captions appear infrequently as the story is told mainly through the images. The opening caption introduces an important astrological motif, not emphasized in the Golem stories previously analyzed in this study. The learned Rabbi Lowe reads in the stars that misfortune threatens the Jews. This astrological motif is reinforced by the image of Rabbi Lowe in what appears to be the pointed hat of a magician studying the stars through a telescope in his tower. He is also using a book of alchemy while in his laboratory below. The bubbling beakers introduce a chemical motif completely foreign to Rosenberg, Bloch, Liebig, Meyrink, and Rothberg. All of the laboratory apparatus non-existent in the earlier legends was to play a major role in the many subsequent Frankenstein films influenced by Wegener's. The 7 haloed stars above the rabbi's tower suddenly dissolve into a mailed fist, which holds the emperor's decree against the Jews, expelling them from the city because of their allegedly despising Christian ceremonies, endangering the lives and property of their fellow men, and using black magic. Whereas Rosenberg and Bloch stress the religious ritual and divine inspiration in the creation of the Golem, the German film emphasizes magic. Rabbi Lowe traces the figure of an artificial man from an alchemist's drawing. Astrological signs and secret writing supply him with instructions for the creation of the huge statue, which he shapes from clay. Astrological signs also indicate that this is the auspicious time to summon the demon Astaroth and make him reveal the secret word which will bring the statue to life. From his book, Rabbi Lowe learns that the Golem was first created long ago by a magician of Thessaly. According to his instructions, if you place the magic word in the amulet on its breast, it will live and breathe as long as it wears it. Another old book suggests a Jewish source claiming, "He who possesses the key of Solomon can force Astaroth to reveal the word. If he observes the due hour of the meeting of the planets, taking his Star of David and a piece of paper, wearing his wizard's hat ornamented with Kabbalistic symbols, and a Jewish star, Rabbi Lowe draws a magic circle around him with his wand, then waves 3 times, producing a ring of fire and another Star of David. Suddenly Astaroth's head appears, and when the rabbi commands him to speak the magic word, smoke coming from his mouth spells out Amiet, the Hebrew word for truth, that is, God. After dazzling special effects of blazing torches and flashing wand, Rabbi Lowe removes his wizard's hat and collapses as he tries to step out of the magic circle. When his one assistant, the terrified Famulus, awakens him, Rabbi Lowe writes Amiet, on the piece of paper, inserts it in a hollow Star of David, and screws it into a socket inside the clay circle on the golem's chest. Immediately, the golem comes alive. Glued explains how the change from statue to man was effected on the screen right before the cameras. According to Carl Bose, an assistant director, Rabbi Lowe was to fumble with the paper upon which the magic word was written. His action supposedly attracted the attention of viewers who never saw the 4 men remove the statue, and Wegener take its place. The golem obeys the rabbi's orders, but loses his animation when the Star of David is removed. As in so many of the early stories, the golem is the rabbi's servant. People are amazed at his prodigious strength. When they observe him splitting logs and getting water from the well, adults are terrified by this strange giant of a man, but not the children who, for the first time in the legend, will play a crucial role in the story's denouement. In Galen's scenario, the unnamed golem shows signs of having human feelings. When Rabbi Lowe takes him to the Emperor's Rose Festival, he snaps at a girl who has the audacity to touch his cheek. But he shows appreciation of another's gift of a flower. Because women flee from his touch, the golem's face is sad as it learns its own horror. The emperor uses the emperor uses the rabbi as a magician to entertain his guests. This is the same story as that found in Pachel's Sipurim and Jurassic's, not Jurassic, maybe it is Jurassic's, Old Bohemian Tales, and mentioned in Meyrink's novel. Rabbi Lowe warns the emperor that no one must laugh as he conjures up spectacular scenes of the Exodus, the wandering tribes of Israel, and Moses. However, when the emperor's girlfriend giggles at the antics of the court gesture and makes the emperor laugh also, an angry Moses threatens the mocking guests. 3 huge ceiling beams fall as the golem blocks the exit. 1 man is crushed to death, but the golem is unscathed as the courtiers panic. A terrified emperor shakes the entranced rabbi and promises to pardon the Jews if he will save him. Rabbi Lowe comes out of his trance and orders the golem to hold up the falling beams so that the fleeing guests can escape. Galen's scenario also introduces a subplot appealing to a movie audience, but not found in any of the previous Golem stories. Rabbi Lowe's flirtatious daughter Miriam has a tryst with Florian, one of the Emperor's knights. She fell in love at first sight when she saw him riding by with a rose between his teeth. When the rabbi returns in triumph from the Emperor's festival and orders the ghetto watchmen to wake the Jews with the glad sound of shofar, Miriam, afraid of being discovered with Florian, locks her bedroom door. Florian's presence would have gone undetected had not Famulus, who was in love with her, decided to deliver personally the joyous news of her father's success. Wegener's Golem shows increasing dislike of his creator. When Rabbi Lowe admiringly puts his hand on the Golem's shoulder, the latter stares at him with hatred. Tension builds as the threatening homunculus covers the Star of David. Preventing the rabbi from reaching it, the angry Golem slowly moves behind the cowering rabbi, who suddenly removes the Star of David just in time to make the rebellious servant freeze. Reading in a German text a warning that at the right conjunction of the planets, Astaroth will reclaim the Golem, who will destroy the master and all living things. Rabbi Lowe decides to smash the clay figure with a wooden mallet. Unfortunately, he is interrupted by the celebration of the Jews below. This interruption gives the jealous Famulus the opportunity to reanimate the Golem and order him to seize his rival Florian. The destruction wrought by the Golem from this point to the conclusion of the film again illustrates Gershom Shalem's observation that a dangerous Golem was a profound change from the original conception, in which he was identified with Adam. The enraged automaton breaks down Miriam's door, brushes Famulus aside, and grabs the girl by the braids until she is momentarily rescued by Florian. But then the Golem hurls Florian from the tower, knocks down the persevering Famulus, and carries the fainting Miriam to the rabbi's study, where he places her prostrate form on a study table. There the modern Caliban studies the girl intently, tenderly touching her face, throat, breasts, and hip. When he puts his face next to Miriam's, Famulus sneaks back and tries to remove the Star of David, but is prevented by the Golem's threatening him with a burning brand. The Frankenstein monster is usually portrayed on film as fearing fire. This torch starts a fire in which the rabbi's chemical jars begin to explode. Dragging Miriam by the hair, the Golem leaves her on a rock where she is found by her father. I thought he was adoring her. Why'd he drag her by the hair? The whole ghetto smokes like Gomorrah. Enveloped by flames, the rabbi's tower collapses. However, the Jews are saved as the Golem disappears, and the people give thanks to their rabbi. Famulus promises to keep Miriam's secret about her dead lover, and asks for and receives her forgiveness. Galen was left with the problem of destroying the dangerous Golem. Traditionally, the one to remove the name of God from the Golem's mouth or forehead was his creator. But the scenario so far has made it unlikely that Rabbi Lowe could perform this act because of the Golem's hostility. Galen solves this problem with a strikingly effective scene for which the audience has been prepared by the Golem's earlier interest in children. Reappearing at the city gates, the Golem watches the children at play in the bright sunlight with flowers in their hair. In a symbolic act intended to bring this sunlight and joyous activity into the dark, stale ghetto, he uses his brute strength to tear down the city gates. The children flee in terror, but one girl remains. She stands there crying as the Golem smiles at her gently. When she offers him an apple, he picks her up and holds her in his arms. Fascinated by the amulet on his chest, this blonde Aryan beauty removes it, thus reducing the giant man to a lifeless statue. The returning children play with the amulet until they lose it. Informed by the watchman that the Golem is near the city gates, Rabbi Lowe finds the children sitting on the inert body, now covered with flowers. As the rabbi praises God, 10 Jews pick up the remains and carry them to the room below what used to be the watchtower. The film ends with a puzzling inconsistency. The gates of the city, torn down by the Golem only hours ago, are miraculously intact as they now swing shut. The white star of David, appearing on the black walls, turns into a white star in the darkness of the heavens. In his introduction to masterworks of the German cinema, Roger Manvell sees German art cinema of the period following World War I as adopting the expressionism always present in art and literature. Der Golem, like the cabinet of Dr. Caligari, 1919, is a case in point. The German expressionist is not so much interested in the external representations of evil, such as sweatshops, ghettos, hunger, and prostitution, as he is in the inner vision which produces them. The expressionist wants to study not the temporary forms and outward manifestations of evil, but its essence and permanent meaning. Seen from this perspective, Der Golem is about man's victimization by those forces originating in his darker imaginings. Creatures conjured by Gothic fancies, vampires, magicians, hypnotists, demented scientists, archetypal criminals, and the like, seeking absolute power over their individual victims or over mankind as a whole. To these forces of darkness were opposed the idealism of the soul, loyalty, love, self-sacrifice, usually demonstrated by innocent youth, and beauty in the face of evil old age and foul decay. Thus, Manvell sees both the medieval legend of the Golem and the film as a clear case of wishful thinking, which oversteps itself because of its dependence upon unlawful black magic. Though the Jews are justified in seeking help to save themselves from persecution, they go too far in creating a destructive monster. In this interpretation, Rabbi Lowe is the villain who brings his people further pain and suffering rather than redemption. Only pure innocence, symbolized by the Aryan child, possesses the counter magic to destroy the monstrous forces of evil. Jewish audiences may not appreciate Manvell's thematic analysis of Der Golem and may find the film anti-Semitic. Semitic. When you hate cement. Anti-Semitic. The glorification of the blonde Aryan child as representing the power of innocence smacks too much of German racism. The rabbi's black pointed wizard's hat, similar to one worn by many other Jewish males in the ghetto scenes, suggests that all the members of this exotic race are perverted by the black magic of their ancient rituals and prayers. It is the demon Astaroth who is forced to yield the magic word which animates the Golem, and it is the sensuality of the Jewess Miriam that leads her to deceive her father and entertain a lover behind his back. However, this line of criticism is only partially valid. The film does portray the Jews as innocent victims of persecution. I imagine it's victims, but the emperor's expulsion order is an evil act of grave consequences. Rabbi Lowe does show compassion in ordering the Golem to save the fleeing Christians when the roof beams collapse, and the silly, giggling girlfriend and despotic emperor are totally despicable. All of these features could be construed as eliciting sympathy for the Jews. Another mitigating factor is the Golem's craving for affection and kindness and his love of children and flowers. He is less monster than the frivolous, mocking guests. In short, it is difficult to accept the Wegener-Galen film as consciously anti-Semitic. It is more likely that the Gothic supernaturalism of the legend has had great appeal to the creative artists. Manvell is certainly right when he praises the film's stylized movements, which border on slow motion. Its bizarre medievalism, suggested by its pictorialized settings and light, and its theatrical cinematic atmosphere with a minimum of captions. It is also hard to fault Manvell's conclusion that the Golem appears now beautiful rather than macabre, a kind of softened nightmare alleviated by the uniform beauty of its images and the unreality of its situations and characters. From 1920 to 1972, several other Golem stories were filmed. Glut describes them all briefly, including the first talkie, Le Golem, produced by the French in 1936 with an almost completely bald monster, and a Czech comedy, Césaris Picard et Picard of César, titled The Emperor, and The Golem in the United States, and then called Return of the Golem, and The Golem and the Emperor's Baker, in which the Golem resembled the stone King Kong, bound at the waist by bolted metal bands with steam shooting from the mouth. At the end of the Czech version, the Golem is tamed by the Emperor's Baker, who then puts him to work in the bakery. Glut also lists Golem films which were planned, even announced but never made, such as The Mask of Milag, the Golem's name spelled in reverse. 3 Golem films were released in the 1960s, 1 French, 1 British, and 1 Czech. The British film was released in the United States as It, Warner Brothers 7 Arts, with Roddy McDowall as the psychotic museum curator, who brought the Golem back to life after discovering the stone-like giant with wrinkled face and pointed head in the ruins of a burned warehouse. The mad curator used the Golem to kill his enemies and destroy a bridge. Predictably, the army was called upon to drop the favorite weapon of the 1950s science fiction films, the atomic bomb. Although the master was destroyed, the Golem survived. With no one to command it, the Golem lumbered into the sea. The last Golem film, Glut, lists in the German Homo Vampire, titled The Golem's Daughter, in English, 1972. 4 years, I'm just going to stop there, because it's a good time to stop. Nah, I might as well go right to The Golem Meets Superman. 4 years after the publication of Glut's book, The Winter Bulletin of the Berkeley, California Film Institute featured an illustrated article on a 15-minute film made by Jan Taylor Blythe, I'm not sure if it's Jan or Jan, Taylor Blythe and Frederick Sweet, called Black Golem. Sweet explains that he and Blythe were familiar with Wegener's 1920 film when they began their script. In addition to Galen's version, they had books on Jewish myths, Haitian voodoo, witchcraft, and classical astrology, but basically the filmmakers were attracted to the archetypal character in the Golem folktale. We wanted to maintain the social consciousness of the original story, so it was natural for us to write a script for a cast of predominantly black actors. In our story, a community of poor blacks would be threatened with eviction. The Golem would step in to scare off the police and protect the people. The film was shot with the budget of just under $2,000 in a film production workshop taught at Berkeley by Sweet and Robert Good. Professional actors donated their services in 5 days of shooting. Expensive wall hangings for the astrologer's chamber were lent by an antique dealer. Since the producers could not afford the type of mask used in Planet of the Apes, they used latex and cotton balls instead in creating the Golem's makeup. The lumpy consistency effectively suggested the texture of rough sculpted clay. The film was completed at the last possible instant before nightfall, with the last shot of the Golem freezing in a menacing pose to the astrologer's command, Shem Ha Meforesh. On November 14th, 1977, the film was shown at the On-Broadway Theater during the first annual San Francisco Screen Actors Guild Conservatory Student Film Festival. And that shall be all for now, bruvs. Goodbye, goodbye, goodbye.